And in this, are we seeing a movement out? Is my question, because it starts at the throne
Yeah,
room, it moves to the
yeah,
posts,
yes,
and then the coals from off the
yes.
altar are the altar of sacrifice, right?
Well, yeah, it's actually the altar of incense, but yes.
It's the
And then it's
altar
going
of
to move out
incense.
again. Notice, right? And he uses the three set, because here's the verse 11 is the how long. And then he says, until the cities are wasted without inhabitant, the houses without a man, and the land be utterly desolate. Well, why is there so much utter desolation when there's a revelation of the king who restores the wholeness?
Ones who are resisting.
People are not resisting.
Yes. So the ones who reject the invitation to be restored to wholeness, what happens to them?
They die.
Well, there's once they reject the source of wholeness, the only source that can make them whole, then they're going to utterly fall apart.
They're going to be
And there's
consumed, right?
so there's going
Yeah.
they're going to be the land,
They'll die.
the cities will be wasted, and the houses will be without man, and land's going to be desolate. By the way, that's what desolation means. The abomination of desolation is the rejection of the source of him who's the source of wholeness, or gives life and maintains order. So apart from him who's whole, the whole source of holiness, there's nothing. That's why it's called desolation, or tohu bohu, or you know. So but what's interesting is you see again the same three-part phrase. He talks about cities, he talks about houses, and he talks about land. So as Don mentioned, you see this idea, it starts at the throne, then it goes to the threshold, then it goes to the altar, and now you're out into the where the people live, in the cities and the houses and the land. So you see this glory of God, the invitation to restore to wholeness starts at the throne with the revelation of the king, and then it goes out. But there's something even more profound here, and this is just blows my mind, but I mean, I've seen it in other places, but it makes sense here. You'll notice that the atonement, the cleansing and atonement for sin, does it take place before Jesus becomes king, or does it take place after he becomes king?
That's what I was going to say.
You see, so he's placed on the throne in verse 1.
King.
And his glory, his train fills the temple. By the way, that's the idea of wholeness. That God fills whatever God abides in, he fills.
We're the temple.
That's part of wholeness, right? And we become living temples. That's right. So then you see the seraphims, they're crying, holy, holy, holy. And the fullness of his glory results in wholeness. Then it makes sense. And then he says, it's then when I see the revelation of God's wholeness or his holiness, only then can I realize how broken I am, how sinful I am, how undone I am, how corrupt I am. This is what Daniel figures out in Daniel chapter 10. This is what John sees in Revelation chapter 1. This is what Moses sees when he goes up the mountain. He sees creatures fall on their face before God, and they acknowledge their sin. Right? They see how broken they are because they see themselves, and they compare themselves to the source of wholeness, of righteousness. So it's easy for me to think, well, I'm okay, I'm not that bad. But then when you see God, you realize, oh no, woe is me. And look how sinful I am. And it isn't until I see the glory of God, his glory is his ability to restore and restore wholeness, and that he's the source of wholeness himself. It's only then that I see how broken I am, how sinful I really am. Then my sin becomes truly sinful to me. Does that make sense? So what's cool here is that he sees a vision of Christ being coronated as king, and then that vision, when he beholds the king, when he acknowledges his sin, then that's when the coal from the altar touches his lips, and his sin is atoned for. It's taken away. It's purged. So you see this idea of the judgment of the living taking place, and the purging from sin and the restoration to wholeness is part of this idea of encountering the living God, the source of wholeness. Does that make sense? And this is why the living creatures are standing around giving the three angels' message, the eternal gospel. And what is the three angels' message, the eternal gospel? Well, that God is the source of holiness, of wholeness. He's the only source of wholeness. And if you come to him, if you accept him as the source of wholeness, then you will be restored to wholeness. That's the three angels' message. And the angels around the throne are not only crying the three angels' message, they're actually living demonstrations of the three angels' message, because holy, 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 they're worshiping the God who is the source of holiness, and he makes all things that he makes whole. So this background here is the background for Revelation chapter 4.
Mm.
This is why the living creatures are crying, holy, holy, holy.
This is almost, to me, when I'm reading it, it's the sealing before he
Yes.
comes.
Yes, that's the seal.
Yes.
That,
The
Yes.
seal, right. The seal is the restoration to wholeness.
Yes.
Yes, that's why the seal deals with our mind and our
Yes.
forehead and our hand, right?
Yes.
The seal has to come
Yes.
from the king's signet ring.
Exactly.
So he has to be
That's right.
king in order to give the seal.
Yes.
Right. And the signet ring is, you get into the idea of the character, yes,
Yeah.
that we, of course, we describe as a ring, but really it's the essence or the name of the king himself, his character, that we are conformed to, that we're transformed to, because that's the source of wholeness.
Yes. Well, the ring was actually, even the word for how the ring was carved is about patterns,
Yes.
and it's about taking that pattern, which represents the pattern of Christ, and impressing it on your mind.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the word pattern and the word character are both used there.
Yes.
That's why we call a letter or something, we'll call it a character.
Yes.
Yeah. This is.
So that's profound stuff.
Yeah.
So when you understand, by the way, this idea that the year that King Uzziah died, well, see, God is using Isaiah's understanding of kingdom dynamics to show him the eternal gospel, because in the ancient world, when the king died, then what happens is that there's going to be a new king. And when there's a new king, then anything under the dominion of the old king is done away, because you have a new king. So you have a new law. This is why the Jubilee, the letting prisoners go free, and all that's being canceled, and people being let out of prison, was all connected to this idea of a new king. Because if you're still in prison because you violated the law for the old king, that means the law of the old king is still into effect, and the new king really isn't the king. So when there's a new king, there's a new standard, there's a new law, which means if you violated the law of the old king, and the old king's dead, there's no law to violate, because there's no old king, he's dead. So this idea of the proclamation of freedom that we call the Jubilee, you wonder why you hear about it in Leviticus and then you don't see much of it throughout the Bible. Well, actually, it's in a lot of places in the Bible, but we just don't recognize it because the Jubilee was connected to the new king, or it was connected to the celebration, the re-inauguration that yearly happened at the Feast of Tabernacles, when you renewed the covenant with the king. It's the same idea. By the way, that's where we get the word birthday from, is to go renewing the covenant. By the way, that's what the idea that we celebrate New Year, and it's connected to Christmas, because the birth of the king is when the year is made new, because there's a new king, so there's a new year, which means the old is gone, and that the new has come. So all this is kingly language that's connected to the coronation of the king. So here in Isaiah 6, God is using the King Uzziah dies, and then Isaiah and all of Israel is expecting to find out who the new king's going to be, and God takes him off in vision, shows him the true king, and shows him the true restoration of wholeness and the true forgiveness of sin, and all the kingly imagery that goes along with it. And this becomes the foundation, one of the foundational prophecy for the rest of the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah 11, you're going to go throughout the book of Isaiah, and he's going to talk about this king and his beauty and the restoration that will take place with this new king. And it's all based on what happens here in Isaiah chapter 6. Does that make sense? So if we would see with our eyes, and what do the living creatures see with their eyes? By the way, they're full of eyes. What are they seeing? What are they trying to find? What are they looking for? Well, they're looking at the fullness of God's glory. And by the way, they can never get enough.
Mm-mm.
Isn't that cool?
Because all they say
They
is
can never
holy,
get
holy,
enough.
holy.
Yeah. Yeah. So these living creatures are full of eyes, but they can see, and they have ears. They're talking to each other, and they can actually hear. And what are they hearing, and what are they seeing? Where they're seeing the Lord of hosts, the King of glory. They're seeing that the fullness of his glory makes the earth whole. That the fullness of his glory makes anything that it touches whole. And by the way, that word holy is also Kadesh, which is the same word we had for the most holy place, or the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
Now, the neat part about this is that actually the language that's used here is that the throne is actually comprised. The Lord is actually enthroned in the wings of the cherubim. The throne is the wings. That he's actually, and remember in the Ark of the Covenant, the Shekinah glory dwelt between the wings of the cherubim on the Ark. He's actually enthroned on the wings. I know we tend to think of the mercy seat as a throne and are thinking that it is, but actually it's called the atonement cover. That the idea of covering has to do with expiation, taken away of sin. So the Lord he's actually enthroned on the wings of the cherubim, the archangels, which is really cool.